Today, my guest is author Elna Baker. We will be talking to her about her first book from the Dutton Penguin Group titled The New York Regional Mormon Singles Halloween Dance, a Memoir. Elna is a Mormon living in New York City and a stand-up comedian, performing in, as her bio states, some of the hottest venues in the city. Well, Elna, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm just great, thank you. Elna, we're going to get right into it, and the first thing that we'll talk about is the book. Of course, the whole thing's going to be about the book, but the New York Regional Mormon Singles Halloween Dance, a Memoir, is a memoir about your search for yourself and a husband and your life as a comedian. First, explain the title and then give us your overview about the book.
Well, the title comes from an actual event that happens in Manhattan every year. Every year they have a Halloween dance for all the single Mormons who don't just live in Manhattan, who live in the tri-state area. And they organize this dance in the church gym, and it has like that feeling of being back in middle school, where you have the generic brand Oreo cookies and the lemonade set up and streamers. And every year for the last 9 years that I've lived in the city, I go to this dance. And every year I swear I'm never going to go back. And every year I end up at the same exact place.
So I assume you attended this year?
I did attend this year. Yep.
And the whole idea is for all of you single folks to get together and hopefully pair up and become husband and wife. Did you find anyone that you were even interested in this year?
I did not, no.
Oh, darn. I was hoping you would. Well,
it would be a great way to, it would be a nice epilogue.
Yeah, I think so. There's probably another book there because lots of interesting things in the book about Mormonism and your problems in meeting somebody. But give my listeners a brief definition of Mormonism and the tenets that you describe in the book.
Well, Mormonism is a Christian faith. So Mormons believe in Jesus and the Old and the New Testament. But they have an additional book called the Book of Mormon. And so that's what sort of distinguishes the religion as something different than Christianity. And the Book of Mormon was something that Joseph Smith dug up, translated, and it's a history of people who came from Jerusalem in 600 BC, traveled to the American continent, and believed in the same teachings that of Judaism, basically, and believed that Jesus would come. And so it's this testament of these people who believe in Jesus but live on the Americas. And it's considered, it's called Another Testament of Jesus Christ. So Mormons believe in the Bible, the Old and New Testament, but they also believe in the Book of Mormon as an additional form of information.
Well, and then I think the other aspect that my listeners would be interested in hearing are the basic things that you as a Mormon, any Mormon, cannot do while specifically while they're single, but then other things continue through life. But there's about 4 basic things, I think, that you described in the book. Why don't you tell us that?
Yes, I talk about how Mormons are known for saying no because we say we don't have, there's no sex before marriage, there's no drinking alcohol, there's no drugs, and there's no coffee.
And with the no, does that apply to any caffeine drink like Coca-Cola and that sort of thing?
That's debatable because it comes from this document called the Word of Wisdom.
Oh, and it specifically says coffee? It
specifically says hot drinks.
Hot drinks.
And people have interpreted that as coffee, but you can have herbal tea and you can have soup, and that's hot.
Right.
But you can't have black tea or coffee. And so people, logic kicks in and they're like, oh, that's because of caffeine. We shouldn't have caffeine as well.
Sure.
Whereas the others of us who kind of want to get away with as much pleasure as we can I religiously drink Diet Dr. Pepper.
Yeah,
So.
okay. Now, how long have you been in New York City now?
9 years.
Okay, so you've been to quite a few of the single balls then, and in your book you say there are about that you weren't sure how many Mormons there were in living right in New York City, but you thought it was around at the time the book was written about 800 single Mormons and at least 20,000 former Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound about right, or has it increased? Or
The numbers have increased. I think there are more single Mormons here, not too many more, but I also feel as though there are a lot more former Mormons in the city than I ever realized.
Uh-huh.
I'm constantly meeting people who grew up Mormon or had some thing to do with the church that they no longer are involved with.
And the fact that they're former Mormons, then they're not a candidate for you as a husband, correct?
Correct. I think part of the progress of the book, it's a coming-of-age story, and it begins with me sort of really holding on to the idea that I need to be married to another Mormon in a Mormon temple. And as I integrate into New York City, meet people, see that there are other ways of viewing the world, it becomes harder to hold on to that specific view. So I feel like now, even though I am still Mormon, I'm more open to being with somebody who's not Mormon.
Okay. Well, I think the fact that you're a comedian who uses some pretty salty language, most people might think goes against the grain of Mormonism. Give my listeners an idea of what your comedy shows are like, and then we'll talk about how all of this began, because you were doing the shows for a while before you wrote the book. So give us an idea of what do you talk about?
Well, I'm an observational comic, so I'll talk about the things that I observe, and a lot of them do have to do with the fact that I'm Mormon. And so there is a lot of fodder that comes from, being somebody who is a virgin, going out on dates, and the different things that the guys that you go out with say to you.
Well, can you give us an idea without, getting the show turned off the air? Can you give us a little idea about one of your observations so our listeners have got a pretty good feeling about what you do in the show?
Well, for the sake of being appropriate, I'll just tell the beginning of this story. But I had gone out with a famous French director, and we got to dinner, and he said, "So are you the Mormon?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, "Oh, can you have the sex?" And so I said, "Not until I was married." And he said, "This is well, if you cannot have the sex, what can you do?" So I said that I couldn't do anything below, and I lined my arm up with my collarbones. I said nothing below here, and then I lined my arm up with my knees, and I said nothing above here. And he sort of processed this and nodded his head and said, "What about the armpits? Can your boyfriend do whatever he wants to the armpits?" And I won't finish the rest of the story, but that's
Get your imagination going, though.
Yeah. Go get the book if you want to know the rest.
Well, yeah, and of course I have the book, so I'm going to have to kind of go through that again. I think I missed that part. So that's kind of the sort of thing that you do in your show. Then you talk a lot about your dating and that sort of thing. The thing that also interested me was the fact that your family lived in many foreign countries because of your father's business, and he had very definite ideas as to how you kids should experience another country. When I read the book, I was struck by the fact that your parents, especially your dad, was a little unusual. So tell us just briefly about your family. How many siblings are there, and tell us about your mom and dad.
Well, my parents, my father's Mexican-American. My mother was born in California, raised in Utah. And they got married when they were 21 and 22. They dated for 3 weeks before they got engaged. And were married 3 months later, and then they immediately had 5 children. And then when my oldest sister was 11, They had 5 kids under the age of 11, and my father got a job in Madrid, Spain, and we moved overseas. And my parents were so excited to be in this whole new world, basically, that they piled us in the van and tried to go to as many countries as they could possibly go to. The one summer we literally visited 25 countries.
Well, and I like the fact too. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to interrupt you from time to time because of time constraints, because there's several things we want to cover. But I also was struck by the fact that they felt that all the kids should experience the local customs by working in different places. So you had most unusual experiences that way. But let's get to the fact that you went to acting school. You were the first in your family not to go to Brigham Young, but went to acting school in New York City. Now, how difficult was that to convince your family of the fact you wanted to go to acting school? And I think this would be the point to mention, too, that Elna, you were a very large girl when the book starts out. And how much did you weigh by the end of your senior year?
The heaviest I weighed was 260 pounds.
That's pretty amazing when people see pictures of you in the book. You're quite a beautiful young woman, and you were quite a beautiful young woman when you were heavier, but you were never happy with your body. So, but let's get back to the question about going to acting school. Did you have to work hard to convince your parents that you wanted to do that?
I mean, my mom was terrified. She still thought New York was the New York she'd seen in the movies from the 70s, where, it's like the streets are full of pimps and hoes and gunshots. And so her advice before I went to school was, she's like, the first thing that'll happen is you might start to swear. And I was like, oh shit, basically. and then she was like, Elna. And then she said, swearing will lead to drinking, and drinking will lead to doing drugs. And so then following her logic, I assumed the next thing she would warn me about would be sex with men. But instead, she looked directly into my eyes and said, and Elna, what would you do if a lesbian tried to make out with you?
I really laughed at that part, your mother's thought process. She wasn't so concerned about you having sex with a man, but what else is going to happen?
And then her final advice was that there were these clubs in New York where men paid large women to dance with very little clothing on. Don't do that. Don't
do it. That's right.
So I was like, apparently I was moving to New York to become a lesbian stripper.
Well, you always were, as I said, unhappy about your size, and you did lose 80 pounds through sheer willpower and hard work. And after you had done that, you decided to have plastic surgery to get rid of the excess skin. Now, there's a picture that I have in one of the articles about you, and is that your actual body before you had the surgery?
With the skin hanging off of it?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, when I had all of the skin on me, I could, because I lost 80 pounds at once, but I'd also lost 30 pounds before that.
Yeah.
So I've lost somewhere between 110, 120 pounds. And what you don't know when you're heavy is that you have this layer of skin that will remain on you, that you can't exercise that away. And so I could pull it like 8 inches away from my body.
Yeah. Well, I was also interested in a trip that you took to Morocco with your family, and how many camels, quickly, how many camels were offered for your sister, and then how many camels were offered for you one day when you were walking through the souk?
Well, I was, in my family, everyone was thin except for me, and my older sister was gorgeous. And so we were always being compared to one another. And we were walking down the street in Morocco, and a man stopped my family to say, "Your daughter's so beautiful. I will give you 1,000 camels for her." And my parents, sort of took my sister and hid them behind her and said, "No, thank you." And then he looked me up and down and said, "I'll give you 100 camels for that one."
Oh. Well, that must have stayed with you for the rest of your life, I imagine. So,
but completely, it's all just an attempt to be worth more camels.
Right, exactly. Well, we'll get into that in a few minutes, but it's time to take a break now. This is the Jacqueline Bachar Show. I'm talking to Elna Baker about her new book, The New York Regional Mormon Singles Halloween Dance, and we'll be right back. Well, Elna, we got into a little bit about Mormonism and a little bit about your routine, and I wish we could talk a little bit more about your comedy routine. Maybe we'll do that later in the show. But one thing that that really this book is about is your great desire to learn how to kiss, and you wanted to meet a boy, a man, later in life, of course, and that's what I'm talking about, your time in New York. You seem to be quite a romantic as a child, and that was the greatest thing you wanted to do, was to kiss a boy. Now, you had a boyfriend at the time of your surgery who stuck with you through it, but it did lead to a breakup after your surgery. However, it left you with an important insight about your body. Why don't we talk about that, and then we'll get into some more about your kissing, because it was quite a description of how you learned how to kiss.
Well, the book is a coming-of-age story in that I had always wanted to find love or have guys like me, but because I was overweight and not comfortable in my own skin, I didn't attract that. And then when I did lose weight, all of a sudden, it was like night and day. I was a size 6. I was getting all this attention, but then I was also a Mormon, so I couldn't do anything more than kiss sitting up, which doesn't really work in New York City too well. And it wasn't until I started dating somebody who was Mormon that I had a more long-term relationship, and he's the one who helped me go through surgery, and yet we broke up shortly thereafter.
Now, was that the boyfriend, because I can't quite remember that section, was that the boyfriend that you actually showed your body to after the surgery? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and he was the first person I ever showed, all the skin on me, too, and I was so nervous about it, but his response was, everyone's self-conscious of their bodies.
Yeah, he really did want to support you. He really did want to see it, but then he left. How did he ever explain that, or just disappear?
Well, he had wanted to get married, and I had moved to Utah in hopes of getting married, and yet I think that it's interesting when people are drawn to you because of your character or personality, or you push the limits. You're a more liberal Mormon, but ultimately what they want to do is change all of that and to tame you. And I think once he realized that I wasn't something to be tamed, it became very real, and he ended the relationship.
So, as I recall, part of being a Mormon wife is there are certain expectations from the husband in terms of what your role in a Mormon family should be. Is that correct?
There are, definitely.
So,
they're not things that come from any sort of biblical scripture. I think a lot of them are cultural.
Yes.
But there's a belief that you should be, it's very traditional male-female roles. As a woman, you raise the children. You, at all costs, abstain from working, and you cook and clean.
And you're a conformist by the standards of the culture.
A nonconformist. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes. Well, yes, you are a nonconformist, but in a traditional Mormon marriage, the woman is expected to conform to whatever those traditions are.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, by chapter 6, you really have learned to kiss, and he was not a Mormon, but it was somebody that you really, really liked, and you had been with him for quite a while, and then he disappeared from your life, and you were very disappointed in that, of course. And you say in the book that 1/3 of Mormon women will not get a Mormon husband because there's more more women than men. So we've got a couple of questions here, and we also have to go back to the question about what you learned about your body image. You covered it a little bit, but how do you intend to deal with that possibility? Now, you said that you're more open to marrying a non-Mormon. Is that because of the statistic that a third of Mormon women will not get a Mormon husband?
Well, there is, Mormons believe that in order to essentially go to the highest level of heaven, you need to be married to another Mormon in a Mormon temple. And so there's a lot of pressure put on marrying someone of your faith. But there are just numbers-wise, like I said, more women than there are men. So it's impossible. But I don't think that's the reason that I've kind of let go of that need. I think that after spending 2 years working on a book and kind of looking at the situation, which is your own life from above, it gives you a little bit more clarity. And I believe that I want to be with the best possible person and not give them 10 extra points because they're Mormon and it pleases my family or it pleases, this definition of God that I had from childhood. But that I want to choose the person who I love. I think one of the challenges of that, though, is that I do still try to abide by these principles, not having sex before marriage. And so that...
So still no sex?
I still don't have sex until I'm married, so I'm open to dating anyone. It's just that not that many people are open to dating me.
Yeah, so you and that's something you talk about in your act. Then is that difficulty. Obviously, there's a lot you can talk about relating to sex that gets a good response from the audience. So I assume that also is part of your act and the difficulty in getting a Mormon husband. How do people react to your routines?
I think that they find it refreshing. I don't think that they've ever, for the most part, met a Mormon who was comfortable enough to talk about these things. I think there's a certain face that publicly Mormons put on or that the church encourages, which is, that people are really happy, kind of cheesy, a little more conservative, and they don't openly admit to having doubts. Is something that I've experienced my whole life, and yet I'm still trying to find my place within that world.
So you wouldn't really have any Mormons coming to your routine then, because I would imagine that some Mormons really don't like the fact, the approaches that you're taking.
It's a little off color for a lot of people.
Yeah. I got the feeling in reading your book that even as a little girl, it was obvious from the beginning of the book that even as a little girl you were questioning all of this, and yet you were raised in this traditional family. But even as a child, you wanted to kiss somebody, and you talk about your difficulty in learning how to kiss. And
yeah.
I think it like I said, it's by chapter 6 you really know how to kiss, and you're a grown woman, but it's taken you that long to learn how to kiss. So that must be frustrating, though, because here you are, you just want to be a romantic and you just want to kiss a guy, and you're having trouble learning how to do that. But so, are you a pretty good kisser now?
Oh, I'm a real expert now. But yeah, I mean, I remember the first kiss I saw. I was in elementary school, and there were these older kids French kissing outside of the school bus, and all of us little kids, we pushed our faces against the window to watch it, and someone started counting to see how long they were holding the kiss, and it was just it was so sexy and exciting to see that, and I wished that I could be the beautiful girl being kissed, and then I was overweight, and then I pined after people, and it wasn't until I lost weight that I suddenly had the first instance where somebody I was attracted to was mutually attracted to me. And when they went to kiss me, I completely panicked because I'd never kissed. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was 22 years old. And so a lot of the stories in that section of the book are about trying to grow up quickly and figure out how to just act like you know what you're doing so you can be a part of this world.
Especially in New York City. And you didn't know what to do with your tongue. That was the biggest. That was the biggest problem you had, learning to know what to do with your tongue. But let's get back to after you had the surgery and you did lose all of that weight, and you've touched on it now and earlier about how people and men reacted to you. But you had some particular insights about your body, and what were they? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I think one of the things that inspired me to lose weight and to take care of my body was the realization that this was going to be my only chance, and that I'd waited so long hoping that maybe I would just magically have a different body or look a different way. And then to realize that I have a body and I can feel and move and jump and do all these incredible things, and yet I don't love myself. And so I made the decision actively to try to love myself in spite of the fact that I didn't like the way that I looked. And once I did accept myself, then I started actually wanting to know what foods I was eating, and then I went on a diet, and then I was able to lose weight. And then, you go through all of these experiences and the surgeries, and after you go through all of this, you begin to realize that your body deserves gratitude.
Well, I think, what was it that your mother or your dad said to you when you asked a question about what was it? When do I graduate from church or religion?
Well, I've always struggled with being Mormon, and when I was young, we had to go to Sunday school every Sunday, and around the same time I started elementary school, and I also didn't like elementary school. And so I found out that there was a word for being done with school, and it was called graduate. So I immediately went home and I asked my mother, when do we graduate from church? And
Yes.
I was very disappointed to find out that the word for being done with church was death.
Yes, and then there was the other question about, it was something to do with your purpose in life, or I can't quite remember how it was phrased, and the response, or why you were here, or what there was about the Mormon religion, and the answer was,
well, I think that,
to have a body.
One of the things that Mormons are taught, and one of the themes of the book, is this idea that part of your purpose is to be born and have this experience in a body, and that you will make choices with that body, and that will determine the caliber of your spirit.
So did that affect your feelings about your body then, the fact that you were bigger than your siblings? And do you think that's when it started? Yeah. Because,
you're taught that your greatest gift is your body, and then you look at the body that you got, and you're like, well, can I return? Is there a refund policy for God's greatest gift? Because I don't like the body that I have.
Yeah.
And then after going through all of these things, I remember really trying to piece together what I really believed. Is my body central to this life experience? What have I learned from my body? Why does it have to be like this? And I remember asking my father that in a very sort of frustrated place, and his answer was, I don't know why that's central to the experience, why the purpose is to be born and have a body and make choices. All I know is that when you were born, I saw your little slimy pink baby body, and I felt your spirit and your presence in the room, and I knew that that body was the only way that I could have you there. And so that's what I believe.
Are you going to stick with comedy? Are you going in another direction? Are you working on another book just quickly now?
I am already thinking of the next thing I'm going to write, and also, there's interest in developing a television show or a film. So, again, you follow these opportunities through and see what happens.
Have you sold the rights yet for film, or is that just in the discussion stage right now?
It's all in discussion.
Yeah. And again, briefly at the end, you've added at each chapter what you believe and used to believe chart. I won't say the conclusions that you reach at the end, because again, I think it's fun for people to read that and to know, and it's a good way to get from one chapter to another, and to let us know how things have changed, and we've heard that from you. So I'm afraid we're running out of time, and I have to thank you so much for being here, Elna. I'll look forward to hearing what's going on with you in the future, and I hope you come back sometime and let us know what's going on with you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye now.